What's up, guys? Kalamazi here. Today, what we're going to be looking at is the new dungeon Atal'Dazar from the World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth Alpha. Now, it's one of the 3 dungeons that's currently available, and in my opinion, it's probably the best. It has a really good Zul'Gurub meets Zul'Aman meets 2018 feel to it that I feel really has exceeded all expectations people had for the dungeon when it was initially released. There's not a whole lot of trash in it. It gives me you get the feeling that it's sort of like a Vault of the Wardens kind of feel. There's 4 separate bosses, and realistically there's a main hub in the center with 3 individual platforms that branch out with a little bit of trash along them, maybe 1 or 2 surprises, but nothing too insane. The first boss is actually basically 2 packs away. The pack we just killed, the pack we're coming up on now. And the only real interesting mechanic we have to worry about or deal with in these first 2 packs is with these mobs here, these skyscreamers, and when they're in subsequent packs later on. The only real thing you actually need to worry about is just the interrupt on the screech that they do. It's about a 4-second fear if it gets off right there. And if it doesn't, realistically, there's something else threatening about them. Now, the first boss we're going to encounter here, his name is Rez'on. He's a pretty simple, straightforward fight with not a lot of mechanics in it. They're not very punishing. It's a pretty good first boss for an instance. The first action mechanic you're going to encounter is called Ancient Dry Bones. You can see right here my group walking over these dinosaur bones in the ground. Basically, don't do it. If you do, it spawns these ads, which are a little bit more so of a nuisance, but you're going to have to kill them during the fight. And that, taking into account the tanky buff later on, it really adds for a lot of damage, unneeded damage as well. He has an ability called Terrifying Visage, which is basically an AoE fear. It's very easy just to LOS it behind the pillar here, which is why we're tanking him so close. The group can easily shift behind the pillar here. He has an ability called Pursuit, which he pursues a member of the group. It's basically about an 8-second channel. If he actually catches the person, he begins to use an ability called Devour on them, which is an 8-second debuff. I believe it takes her out 4,000 damage or so a second. It's a pretty heavy dot, but outside of that, there's not really much else to this fight. The last mechanic you're actually going to see here is called Serrated Teeth. It's basically an 8-second debuff that's applied to your tank that increases just the physical damage taken by 50%. Active mitigation or cooldown or something can easily help you survive this mechanic. Besides that, there's not much else to it. One thing to mention is that Tremor Totem is great when he's actually casting Terrifying Visage. It basically invalidates the entire Visage, and multiple shamans makes it even easier. Warlock Gateway Demonic Circle helps if you're actually a Warlock, or your group can use it once every 2 minutes. Besides that, the fight's pretty straightforward. There's not really a whole lot else to it. Now, one of the things I like most about this dungeon, and I would imagine most everybody else was as well, is that there's not a whole lot of trash. There's not nearly as much trash as there is in the other 2 dungeons that are currently live on the alpha. It reminds me a good bit of Vault of the Wardens, where you encounter a little bit of trash at the beginning, kill a boss, and then you kill a little bit more, and there's like this central hub, just like Vault of the Wardens. You can choose either go left or right, and whichever boss you decide to go to first is up to you, just like Vault of the Wardens. With this actual pack here, the Toxic Saurs don't really do a whole lot. They jump, they're a bit annoying, they do a frontal slash, I believe. And the main 2 larger mobs here do hurt a bit, but besides that, there's not much else to it. Now, as I mentioned before, I felt that the Ancients really has a lot of a good bit of a Zul'Gurub feel meeting Zul'Aman, and one of the things that I really like and enjoyed they brought back the most, remember from Zul'Gurub, was actually this fire gauntlet here. As you can see, it will one-shot you, and there's not really much else to it. You know, it hits extremely hard, and from what I can tell, there actually is a bit of a pattern. I think it just goes from top to bottom. That's what I've seen in most runs that I've done, but it's still something to look out for. The second boss we're going to encounter here, his name is Priestess Alun'za. She doesn't have a whole lot of abilities, but the ones she does have are pretty important. If you don't do them, they can very easily lead to a wipe. The first ability you're going to encounter is called Tainted Blood. It's the red blood pools in the ground. Basically, if you step in them, it puts a dot on you, effectively tainting your blood for a certain amount of time. The thing is, you want to actually step in them. When she starts casting Transfusion, it's basically a few second channel. It's going to be a channel into each every player. If you have the Tainted Blood debuff, instead of her healing herself during the cast of the Transfusion, she actually takes damage, which is something obviously that's very important. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of Tainted Blood spawning, and these abilities and her Transfusion actually repeat Relatively frequently, a bit more than I thought they would. As you can see, we pull all the trash from the instance, including one from the side, one for the road, why not? But besides that, the main other abilities she has really aren't that impactful. They're also not 100% finished from what I believe. And as you can see here, she's beginning to start casting her transfusion again. There's also a lot of tainted blood on the ground. The one thing to make note of is that not every pool needs to be stood in or soaked. It's just basically every member of your party has to have the debuff. Don't be like me. Get the debuff. As you can see, it actually heals for a decent bit. You know, whatever effective damage we do over the duration for a channel is pretty much undone. And on, you know, certain Mythic Plus weeks like Tyrannical, this and that, it's obviously going to be pretty much an instant wipe. The next mechanic you're going to see is called Gilded Claws. Basically, just she puts it upon herself and increases her melee damage by 150%. Once again, tank cooldowns and active negation can pretty much make it invalid. Molten Gold is the last ability that you'll see. As you can see, she just reaches into one of the two gold pools next to her and throws it onto a random target. It gives him a debuff for 30 seconds. And from what it says, it's a regular stacking dot. And from what the Dungeon Journal actually says, it indicates that you actually deal less damage. Unfortunately, I don't know what percent damage that is. I don't believe it's actually implemented in-game yet. But besides that, there's not really much else to it. Just dealing with the tainted blood, dealing with the transfusions, making sure everybody has the debuff right before. It's very similar to Maiden of Virtue and Lower Karazhan. You know, you want to dip into the debuff right before it happens. Basically, have the debuff, and when it's gone, you step out. Nothing too crazy about that. The fight is pretty straightforward. Just there's a lot going on, even though not a lot of it's very complicated. Now the next boss we're heading to is named Vol'kaal, and as you can see there's not a lot of trash basically to him. There's just these 3 packs here, and then you go up this area and he's there. The main pack you want to deal with here, the main ability you want to look out for is once again from the Feasting Skyscreamer, just like the ones you encounter at the beginning of the instance. The Terrifying Screech needs to be interrupted. It's a 5-second fear that obviously will fear the entire group. A Tremor Totem can also be used here, it's like on the first boss. Thankfully that's back, which is awesome. Besides that, you know, the Atal'Dazars, like I said, aren't very threatening. You know, I could very easily have seen on Mythic Plus being a bit more threatening, something similar along the lines of the cats and Dark Heart Ticket at the beginning. As you can see, there's 2 packs here. They're both the same. Basically, keep the Feasting Skyscraper interrupted, kill the Zars, and move on. Now, one thing to make note of here really quickly is I did switch classes for Vol'kaal. Unfortunately, when I ran this initially on my Warlock, he was bugged and took about an hour from actually hotfixing for. Now, he's basically immune to damage, so all 3 of these totems around him are a kill. He does certain abilities in this phase that he'll do in the second phase as well, with a few added abilities. The first ability he does involve is called Noxus Stench. Now, what he's going to do is slam the ground every 1.5 seconds or 3 seconds. Basically, when that's over, it applies a debuff on you. As you can see right now, it's called Lingering Nausea. It's also a stacking debuff. This is sort of like one of the enrage mechanics that you have to push him on the face fast enough before it stacks too high and regular tank debuff. You can see one of the things right here as well is called Toxic Leech. If he jumps across the room, it's very easy to move out of it. It's the large green swirl on the ground. If you're not out of it, it'll deal damage to you and knock you back as well. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You're basically in this phase until you kill it for your animation totems. When you actually enter his second phase, which is his last phase, Rapid Decay comes into play. Rapid Decay is sort of a debuff on him where he increases his damage dealt by 50%, but also deals roughly 1,000 damage to himself basically every second. It's sort of like an enrage in a sense. He's going to be continuously dealing a lot more damage to your tanks. As you can see, he's also spawning these toxic pools in the ground, and they're thrown basically on every member of the raid. And it's sort of like one of the harder raids in the fight. I can very easily see this being one of the harder bosses in here on Tyrannical weeks, and it's definitely going to be a fight where you want to save your Bloodlust, your Heroism, your cooldowns for, especially on the second phase here. You want to have a route you can kite him around the edge, or some predetermined path where you have enough room for your melee to stand as well as your range. It helps both each time. 1 or 2 members in range to the center of the room. And one of the best ways to actually deal with the toxic pools is just to hug the edge them. Hug the edge like the healer is doing in the center there, where you leave just enough space for you not to get clipped and partially overlap the other one. And that's basically it for this fight. It's basically going to be just a healer DPS check while having your tank survive long enough for you to kill the boss. I can very easily see this being one of the harder bosses, if not the hardest in here on Tyrannical Weeks. One thing that I did want to mention in the difference between normal, I guess, and heroic and higher difficulties is that the reanimation totems in the initial phase need to be killed within 10 seconds of each other. If they're not, they end up healing back to full. The last boss of the instance that we're going to encounter, his name is Yasma, and she's actually a very straightforward, simple encounter, but her abilities are very unique and extremely punishing if you make a mistake. The first ability we're going to encounter here is called Soul Rend. It basically chooses a random member of the party, and they'll spawn an adder after 3 seconds. Getting far away from the boss is highly advised. The ad is stunnable, obviously it's killable. You want to kill it before it reaches the boss. If for some reason it does reach the boss, it's going to explode and put a debuff on the raid called Soul Feast. Now Soul Feast is an extremely hard hitting debuff. It deals roughly 1700 damage every 1.5 seconds, and the thing is that it does stack. This makes it extremely important to kill the ads whenever they spawn, 100% giving them priority over the boss at all times. The next ability you see here is called Echoes of Shadra, which was the purple balls or the little ghost spiders you see right now. Basically, standing within 5 yards of them is going to cause them to explode for roughly 10,000 damage and leave a pool, as you can see right there, of shadowy remains behind. Shadowy remains basically slows you by 30% and deals about 13,000 shadow damage every 2 seconds while you're standing in it. It's pretty simple to avoid them, just basically watch out, and if you hit them, move far away from it. Racking Pain is an ability that the boss casts. It's basically, you want to interrupt it every time. It's a relatively high tank damage fight, and it's obviously unwanted and warranted damage, so make sure you have an interpretation set up for Racking Pain. Skewer is the last ability that we're going to encounter on the fight. It's a tank mechanic that basically you're going to want some kind of active mitigation or some kind of cooldown up for. It's relatively hard hitting, and with the large amount of party damage, raid damage going out, and just the high amount of tank damage during the fight as well, it's definitely something that you don't want to miss and be aware of. As you can see here, there's not really a hard enrage in the fight. The shadowy remains have begun to stack up a good bit, but that's just partially due to everybody hitting Echoes of Shadra unnecessarily. With that being said, this is pretty much the entire fight. It's pretty straightforward, but it's a pretty interesting and creative fight in general. Overall, I thoroughly enjoyed the instance. I feel that the vast majority of the bosses were very well designed. I think some might be a little bit overtuned, I think some might be a little bit undertuned. But overall, I feel that Atal'Dazar really brings, in essence, something that we haven't felt since Zul'Gurub, since Dilamoniki, you've been playing that long. And we know that the vast majority of the player base has been asking for a troll dungeon or a troll raid for a little while. And in my opinion, this dungeon delivers, hands down. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Let me know what you thought of the dungeon in the comments below. And if you want to see more Warcraft content, walkthroughs, tactics, and guides, like, share, and subscribe. If you want to follow me on Twitter, my Twitter is in the description below.